This was the genesis of Area 51 in essence. There was a scientist who defected from Area 51, a gentleman by the name of Bob Lazar. And Mr. Lazar came out of Area 51 and basically claimed that the United States government had 9 alien craft that had either been shot down or we'd gotten in some kind of deal, that some of the craft were in perfect working condition and were being flown by our pilots, other craft that they were taking apart and trying to figure out the technology on them. Lazar was very specific about the anti-gravitic power system, that they had antimatter engines, which in essence created gravity as a field, as a wave, and exactly like we would create X-rays or gamma rays or microwaves or any other type of wave technology, and that they basically broken through not only what gravity does but what gravity is. And of course, once you understand what gravity is, you change the nature of all of mankind. I mean, it's the next quantum leap in humanity's evolution, because it means human beings moving off this planet and floating cities into space, and an unlimited energy supply, virtually an unlimited food supply at the same time, because you can tier land one on top of the other. Anyway, it would change everything. It would allow, primarily stop war and stop hunger. And he was originally interviewed by a gentleman by the name of George Knapp, who was an Emmy Award-winning producer in Las Vegas. And my documentary crew, UFO Contactees, interviewed him in the early part of 1990, which was about 6 months after Lazar came out. One of the most fascinating things that Bob said was that we didn't have to believe a single word he said about his contacts with aliens on the base and the technology, but that all we had to do was go out to a black mailbox on Highway 375, which is about 135 miles north of Las Vegas, on Wednesday nights from 6:30 on, and we would see flying saucers. So it was February 26th, Wednesday night of 1991, and I managed to get an LA Times reporter and photographer to go out to this area with us. It was a dark and stormy night, and I had never seen a UFO before. After I had done so much research into UFOs, we'd literally spent almost a solid year doing nothing but traveling all around the world for this documentary to interview everybody that had anything to do with the UFO phenomenon. Scientists, abductees, contactees, researchers. Somebody had a dog barked at a UFO. We went out and talked to them all over Europe, all over the United States, all over Canada, all over South America. And I'd never seen a UFO ever, and here I'd had people in my family talking about them. My father was the public relations director for NASA. I have 2 godfathers that walked on the moon. Gordon Cooper, Gus Grissom, Alan Shepard, Gene Cernan were all really good friends of the family. And I'd never seen one of these things. It was my goal in life to see one. And then we're driving along this road outside of Area 51, and we literally had one of these craft it's probably about 60 feet around, and it looked like an upside-down cereal bowl with sort of a flat teacup on the top of it, almost hit the car, bounce off the hood I'd say about 4 feet away or so, and then rumble off into the desert. And we cranked the car over into the ditch and just stared in shock at this thing, and grabbed our snow hats and our flashlights and jumped out of the car and started running after this. And we got within probably a good couple hundred yards of this object, floating anywhere between about 2 feet off the ground to about 200 feet off the ground. And it looked like whoever was flying it didn't know what they were doing, because the thing was just crashing into stuff and bouncing up and down, and it was a very, very erratic motion. And it had this reddish-orange glow around the outside of the ship as well, that when we got our faces badly, badly burned by whatever this was. Of course, we didn't care, because I was just so happy that I'd seen this. My friend Jeff, who was with me, had been out there already about 5 times before, and he was very blasé about it, saying, "Oh, well, this is a particularly good sighting, but we've seen better." And and I thought he was nuts. So finally, when the saucer sort of rumbled off into the desert, we ran back to the car and went down to the road. And there was a whole group of people down at the road, and it was very funny, because they were sitting in a car because it was cold, and they were looking towards the lights of Las Vegas because they thought that was Area 51. And we're saying, "No, you idiots, it's over there." And then they all turn around, and then they see this thing bouncing off into the desert. We say, "That's a saucer. We were just next to that." So we have an LA Times reporter and a photographer there. And we asked the LA Times photographer, we said, "Look, can't you take a picture of that? There it is. It's floating down the valley." The guy said, "Well, all I brought was a Hasselblad portrait camera that has a range of 12 feet. And I was told specifically by the LA Times that I was only to take pictures of people looking at UFOs, not to take pictures of UFOs." So this was the beginning of the cover-up to make us all look like we were complete idiots and fools running around in the desert like we were just seeing military planes or something. And the reporter they sent us, this was even funnier, because she was legally blind in one eye and night blind in the other. So we had 50 people all watching this object object, all sort of maneuvering, and she's looking at me going, I can't see anything. I can't see anything. What are you looking at? So she went back to report that, that we were looking at something in the sky which she couldn't see because she was standing next to us. So it's the ultimate media axiom, which is that if 1,000 people see something and one blind man doesn't, that the blind man gets as much press or as much videotape as the 1,000 people that actually see something. So that began a grand adventure for me, because I then started, I had all kinds of friends who wanted to see this stuff for themselves. So I started just taking, vans, and we'd all basically pitch in for the gas and the food, and we'd drive out there like every other Wednesday and videotape and film this stuff. And Area 51 received international attention when I discovered a mountaintop, a ridge and a mountaintop that actually looked right down on the base. And the military had expanded its borders in 1986 by about 89,000 acres, and they missed this one area. And I managed to find the one chink in the military's armor that was still on public land. And I started climbing this hill, looking down on the facility, which of course made the military just royally angry, because I was sitting up there with my friends in our deck chairs, like Joe Bob Briggs at the drive-in, with our binoculars looking right down the throat of the most top secret above-ground military installation that the United States government at that time maintained. This began sort of a whole fight. And the funny thing is that then there was like a lot of war amongst the researchers, as well, who found the hill or who discovered this or that, and it got a lot of national attention. We were on the front page of Popular Science and Omni, but it was that mountaintop that actually then created a huge furor, because then the military wanted to find a way to confiscate the mountain, and they couldn't do it because if they expanded their border by 5,000 more acres, they would have to go through a congressional oversight committee. So what they did is they expanded the border in a large tentacle that just came up to the top of the hill and just took the top of the hill, which only expanded their border by 4,900 acres, and that was done about a year or so ago. And so that was one of the things that I knew, that if I could just start taking people out there and get the media and get the press and just jump up and down and yell and scream and say, look, this is where this stuff is. If you don't believe me, come out and see it for yourself. And enough people actually came out and saw it for themselves that it became global. The one thing about the media that was the most interesting is that here I had Montel Williams that wanted to go out there. I had Montel Williams went out. I was on the Montel Williams show a couple of times. I was doing a segment for Geraldo's Now It Can Be Told, but they didn't want the camera crew out there at night or on a Wednesday. They had to do it on the weekends. Montel didn't go out until all the stuff was moved. Larry King did a big piece out at Area 51, but they didn't go out till everything was moved. So by late 1993, we'd been going out there for about 3 months and had not seen a thing. And my sources from inside the base and people that were close to what was going on said that the saucers had been moved out. They weren't doing any testing anymore, that they were moving in new troops, and it was being converted to some other use. And it was literally after that, when the saucers stopped and the sightings stopped, that it's like the media pulled up the floodgate and said, okay, it's fine, you can come out here, ollie ollie oxen for you, everybody can come out. And that was when all the media blitz started up, and this is where you get sort of the hoaxsters and the charlatans and the jackass researchers who are out there. Some of who say, "Well, I've been out here and I've never seen anything," blah 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 blah, and and it's forced me to be up on TV saying, "Well, you're just a day late and a dollar short. Where were you guys between 1991 and 1993 when I was begging the press to come out here and bring beta cams and bring film cameras?" Same thing happened with sightings. We actually went out there while it was going on, and a ship popped up over the hill and started maneuvering, and the sightings guys would not turn the cameras around because they had orders from their producers to specifically not shoot a UFO out there, nothing definitive or nothing that might be considered military. So it's just, I'm in the center of this huge cover-up by the press that wants to make it look like there's something out there, but doesn't want to present the public with the definitive proof of the craft. Same thing happened with the Montel Williams show. I went on Montel Williams, and they just had all these people on to attack me personally with just, ridiculous lies that, like I never went to college and I didn't have any degrees and, and all this, and I forced the producers to show my degrees on the TV, or I was going to have this conversation with them. My attorney was going to contact them and sue these guys, and I had definitive evidence of photographic video of UFOs and things dancing in the sky, which of course they wouldn't show because they didn't want anybody to have any sort of physical proof. They just wanted to make us look like we're all nuts and just keep it open so the natives with the pitchforks and the torches could have somebody to scream at. So it's and then it's so funny to watch a movie like Independence Day, where here you got a movie that's just grossed $250 million, and it's all about how Area 51 saves the world, and I'm just sitting in the theater going, okay, who's getting paid here? Not much on the hill. I mean, we were swooped by helicopters and, dive bombed by jets and photographed and, we just saw the base, and there were things that were landing and coming and going, and we saw some unusual saucer activity. It's actually it's kind of funny because where the saucers are actually kept, where the ships are being tested at, wasn't the actual Groom Lake facility. There was another facility. It was behind sort of another mountain range. It was called Papoose Lake. That was about 25 miles away, and even Lazar was saying he would sort of get on another bus and go down to this separate facility. And Papoose Lake was much further down. So here was like Groom Lake from on top of the hill, and where you'd see the stuff test would be sort of way over to the left. But we saw some unusual lights, and we saw some stuff on the that they seemed to be testing or building on the ground. And I mean, probably the most, with the exception of the saucers, and I just saw hundreds of those. I mean, there was just the sky would just rip open every night. We'd have 40, 50 really good sightings in a night. With the exception of the discs and the little dancing lights in the sky. The other thing that I saw out there with a very good friend of mine, John Hadley, who was murdered about a year ago, was we saw an object that came in from space that had a huge blunt shovel nose on the front of it. It was some sort of aircraft. Had a blunt shovel nose, and then it looked like two door stops, sort of one on top of the other. And it came up and it bulged in the center, and then the back part of it sort of scooped up like the back end of like a 62 Corvette. It was black on the bottom, white on the top, with what looked like two sort of bubbles on the top of the fuselage. And this thing was gigantic. I mean, it was literally somewhere between 1,600 and 1,800 feet long. And this thing came in from one end of the valley, making no sound, did a long sweeping motion, and this was about 3:34 a.m. or so, and then came in, and instead of landing like a plane, the thing actually came in like a plane and then just sort of stopped and hovered and then came down perfectly straight. And then about 8 minutes later, there was this ripping roar that knocked us over, knocked over the camera, smashed one of the windows in the car. This ripping sonic boom, and this was an object that was coming in from space that was going so fast that it was creating 3.4 earthquakes on the ground, and it was reported all over the news, and they were called skyquakes. And they were coming in over San Diego, over Catalina, right over Los Angeles, and then over Mount Shasta as well. And this was reported on every major news media in Los Angeles for the period it was happening back in the summer of 1992. I later interviewed a scientist. This was interesting because just 2 weeks ago I spoke to a scientist who worked out at the facility as he was in manufacturing, and he was there between 1965 and 1970. And he said, "Oh yeah, that's the E13141." And I said, "What's that?" And he says, "It's a lunar shuttle." And he says, "We go back and forth to the moon, and it's got Martian capabilities as well. And the thing can also go, apparently it's got extrasolar capabilities, which means it can go out to the edge of the solar system, sort of cruise around, and then come back in." And I said, "Well, how big was this thing you were looking at?" And he says, "It was 1,800 feet. And I said, "When did you see it when you were there?" Because he drew it for me, and it was a little bit different. It was sort of a original version of what we had seen, and it was a lot different from what we'd seen in the valley. And he was out there in 1967 when he claimed that this 1,800-foot thing would come in from space, and that the thing was so hot that they had to put it in the hangar and douse it with liquid nitrogen, and they couldn't go anywhere near it for like 4 hours. He also said the skin on it was like fiberglass. He said it looked like fiberglass, but it felt like a shark. He said it was almost like fleshy, the skin on the craft itself. So it's just been for me, it's just been an amazing adventure, because it's been there's been everything from scientists and researchers and crackpots and wannabes and local yokels and cowboys, and I mean, it would make probably the most if they ever did the real story of what was going on out there from all the different angles, probably make one of the best movies ever. It's back to regular military stuff. I mean, as far as I know, there haven't really been any, they certainly don't test on a timetable anymore. I haven't been out there for like 2 years because there's just not much to see. I mean, it's still a secret research facility. They're still dealing with, there's 3 levels to the technology. There is the private sector, which is like Northrop Grumman, Hughes, TRW, Litton, Rocketdyne, all the public sector stuff. And the public sector stuff is primarily garbage. It's all the stuff that the military doesn't really want to use. It's obsolete, it's obsolescent, it's expensive, and basically they release stuff to the public that is the least cost effective. And That's what the private sector gets. The next sector is the military level of technology. And the military level, which is pretty much what Area 51 represents, is anywhere between 15 to almost 25 years ahead of anything that you or I have ever heard of. And the joke in the military, of course, is if you've heard about it, it's obsolete. So they're dealing with everything from anti-gravitics to time-space fields to teleportation. And actually well, not teleportation, but what are called boom tubes, which are actually electromagnetic lenses that they focus that you can walk through like a door and come out any place on the planet if you want, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is stuff that's so far in advance of what we know of. And then there's another level above that, which is what I call the shadow technology. And it's like there's a block that seems to be a power structure, almost like a shadow government that's made up of these 9 families, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Habsburgs, and that have consolidated their money and their wealth and their power over not just a generation, but over hundreds of years. And anything that can be of real benefit or a quantum leap in the technology to mankind is absorbed up into this sort of shadow level of technology. And God knows what they have. I mean, they have stuff that's so far above what we imagine. It's probably farther than we even can imagine, because there is a level of people on this planet who are living at a technological level that is, it's like comic books. I mean, it's like the X-Men. It's like it's just so far in advance of anything we dream of. They have unlimited funds, unlimited resources, underground bases. You know, Area 51 is a playpen, you know, compared to what they really have at places like Pine Gap and the Dulce Mesa and you know, the underground facilities, or you know, I know, for example, as sure as I'm sitting here, from everybody that I've spoken to and from photographic evidence that I've collected from the NASA missions, the Apollo missions, that we have bases on the moon. We've probably got about 3,500 working personnel on the moon in 4 places. The Saraslavsky crater, which is on the backside, the Van de Graaff crater, Tycho Brahe, and the King crater. That's where most of the activity seems to be based. And that's one of the reasons why NASA's not being allowed to go back to the moon, because they were afraid that NASA, being a public organization, would blow the cover on what's really going on up there. And of course, NASA was sending back a lot of photographs that a lot of people were asking a lot of questions about. The very nature of the moon is actually what it is, and the scientific aspect of what we've been fed is actually in question by a large number of dissident scientists. That we're not ready for it. That in essence, it's sort of like, you know, why doesn't the farmer in the house tell the cattle and the pigs and the horses in the barn certain things? You know, and it's my opinion that if people are gonna act like cattle and they end up staked, then they've only got their own damn selves to blame. It's a lot of it's being hidden in plain sight. I mean, the information is available. It's just a question of it doesn't go back to an absolute, abject, provable source in essence. And so a lot of it is based on rumor and innuendo and interviews and what certain people saw. And I think that the reason the government's keeping it from us is because, one, they're, like I said, dealing with the technology that is so far in advance of anything that we have. Some of it may be released to the public, but you have to remember that we don't really have a new technology. There hasn't really been a new technology released since World War II. I mean, we have bigger and better and faster and smaller, but there hasn't been a quantum leap forward over and above the internal, or what some people call the infernal combustion engine. I mean, we're still using technology that's over 100 years old. And what's the biggest problem? The biggest problem is going to be is that if you release anti-gravitics into the population, anti-gravity just as a concept, that suddenly you make energy free, you make housing free. Because remember, if you're dealing with building things, a kid with a box of Legos can now build New York City, because you're dealing with weight without having to worry, you're dealing with mass without having to worry about how much something weighs. So whether or not I pick up a styrofoam block or something that weighs 100 tons, it's the exact same amount of effort on my part. So housing becomes free, energy becomes free, food becomes free. Why the hell are you going to get up in the morning? People are, basically what the power structure is afraid of is that if you make all these services available to mankind, that they're not going to go out and better themselves or educate themselves or become involved in art or the education of themselves and their children. They're going to sit around, drink beer and in their underpants, watching all-star wrestling, dancing in front of the videos like Madonna. I mean, they're afraid to take people out of the hamster wheel where you have to get up every morning and get in the wheel and do your little part to pay your taxes and be involved in the obsolescence of the technology. The power structure does not believe that humanity or mankind has evolved that far. And in a lot of cases, I would say almost 80% of the population, they're probably right. If you just leave a population to itself, you just get nothing but crime, and the population sort of turns in upon itself, even though all of its needs are paid for. You in essence get a welfare society. Once again, to refer to them, this block of shadow government that is a group of these 9 families, banking families, financial families that have consolidated their wealth and their power, not just over a generation, but over, as I said, hundreds of years. I mean, imagine, if you will, that there has never been a technological advance that has been lost since Da Vinci, as an example. I mean, and here you've got Da Vinci, who invents who invents the airplane, the parachute, the hot air balloon, the tank, the first submarine, all those designs. Imagine if we've been working on that for 500 years. I mean, I can tell you, if the Crusades hadn't happened, Arab technology was so advanced in the Ottoman Empire that if we didn't have the Crusades between the 10th and about the 13th century, we'd have an Arab on the moon in the 1700s. They had to stop that progression of technology. So this is not something that's been going on for a generation. These are families and consolidations of families that go on for hundreds, possibly thousands of years. And the link would actually be back to an extraterrestrial source. Let's take it back to the Bible. Biblically, if you go back to Genesis 6, verse 1, it says, "The sons of God came down from the sky, saw the daughters of men that they were fair, took them to wife, and had sex with them, and their sons and daughters became the kings and queens and mighty men of old. And there were giants in the land in those days, and the giants made slaves of men." So right there in the Bible, you have the power structure of these sons of God, literally extraterrestrials, intermating with human females, whose children then become the power structure, the kings and queens, or the mighty men, et cetera, et cetera. And we've just recently, just in the last couple hundred years, broken out from a monarchical system where it is believed that the planet itself belongs to God, or Yahweh, who's somewhere out there, and that he's left his children, the kings and queens, to take care of the planet, that God owns the planet, and they're sort of the landlords of the planet, and or the managers of the planet, and we're all sort of paying them rent in the great cosmic plantation. So, I mean, it goes back a long way. This is from a case that I own the rights to now, of a gentleman who calls himself Adrein, and this is going to be probably one of the biggest UFO extraterrestrial cases on the planet. Where do you want him? Right there? Probably one of the biggest UFO extraterrestrial cases on the planet. These photographs were taken by Adrein. This photo, for example, he took a video, and he actually took a photograph of the video. But this is a extraterrestrial craft flying over near the Miami airport. These are photos of the underbelly of the ship, of the craft here. This is the same craft, except this was the underbelly where the propulsion system is, and this is a craft that's actually up in the clouds, because he's actually on a ship riding on a UFO, taking photographs literally out the window of this craft. This is one of the better ones that he took actually up in the clouds. This craft here, he lives on a golf course right outside of Miami Beach, and I guess the Pleidians come in and play 9 holes when they're visiting him, I suppose. This one set of photos is particularly unusual because this is a photo of a landed craft that he took in the Everglades. He goes out into the Everglades, sort of out into the jungle, to go meet and make his contacts. This is called a telemeter ship. It only holds 2 people, but it's usually robotic. It's like a robot craft that goes in and does probes and what have you. And here's the landed version of it. And then the craft took off and flew over him, and it's a little hard to see, but the craft became invisible. And just as the ship was becoming invisible, it became opaque, and you can actually see the clouds through the ship as it's disappearing. These are kind of neat because this ship here is actually from the bottom, and this is the same ship actually from the top. And this photograph is this is the sun in the background, and they're actually doing some sort of solar experimentation where there were some problems with sunspots of some kind that were creating gravitational disruptions, and they were doing something about it. This is the top of this craft when the actual engine system is working. They have on the top here, this is a faceted crystal at the top, and this is a holographic projection system. This craft actually travels by simply taking a photograph in a computer of a place where it wants to go, and then it simply vibrates at the frequency of the place that it wants to go to, and it becomes the place where it wants to be, which is their explanation for it. And this photograph here is probably one of the most spectacular of the photos because he's in a ship specifically, and he's looking down, and this is the coastline of Florida here. And here's a Type 1 variation beam ship, which is one of the older models. And this is what's called the Type 7, which is the photographs I've been showing you. And this craft not only has the ability to travel, this one only has a solar capability. It can only travel within a solar system. This one can travel between star systems, but it also has the ability to travel in time as well. So, and that's a case that I own the rights to. That. Oops.
Tell us more about the case.
Yeah.
I can't tell you that much about it, really. I can only tell you that it's a man calls himself Adrein. He's about ready to come forward. He's releasing, in my opinion, what is the singular most spectacular film footage, video footage, and photographs that humanity has ever seen. It's incredible stuff. I mean, he's got video of actual ships landing, and then him walking up and getting on the craft and like shaking hands with these guys and being inside the ship and taking photographs and video inside the ship. And we're not talking about little dancing lights in the sky. We're talking about full-on daytime 12 noon footage with ships landing, film, video, and photographs of other planets, other star systems.
So what kind of communication does he have? Do they speak? Or?
Yeah, of course. He says they're us. You know, this is what people don't understand, is that the Pleiadians put humanity here. I mean, they're our parents, our grandfathers, our older brothers and sisters, so to speak. That all the various races on the planet come from different places. The Caucasoid races come from the Pleiadians. The red races come from Sirius A. The black races come from Sirius B. The Asian races come from Epsilon Eridani. So we're a grand star-spanning species that comes here from all over the universe. And so in this case, the Pleiadians are, he says they look exactly like us. The only difference is that they don't have a bridge in the nose. They've got very long aquiline Roman noses that sort of come straight down. The women are about 6.5, 6'7". The men are about 7.5 feet tall or so. They have a very extensive base down in South America. And he's traveled back and forth to the planet several times, and he says that they're here now because there are great earth changes and catastrophes and a great graduation that mankind is about to go through, and that they are here to, I wouldn't say so much help as to observe. They'll help when and where they can, but their opinion is that it's our planet. We made this mess. We got to clean it up. So we've made our bed and we have to lie in it, and they'll assist us where and when they can, if it's possible. So he actually isn't not only in contact with them, but he flies on the craft on a regular basis. He takes his girlfriend along. She's allowed to go. He said to myself and my producing partner in this that he'll take us at some point in the future. These Pleiadians seem to actually get along with humans pretty well. They have a lot of training in dealing with Earth people. It's difficult for them because they're telepathic, and so if you're telepathic or a medium at all, an Earth person sort of sounds like a very, very yippy, obnoxious Pomeranians, right? Because we're so scattered that human beings actually make the Pleiadians physically ill because we give off like a psychic stench because we do not have clear thought processes, and we're very scattered in our own thoughts and our own goals and our own intentions. And you can't lie or be anything other than what you are to a being that's empathic and telepathic. They've taken him to the future a couple of times, yeah. That the Pleiadians' whole problem is that they say whenever they go to any future that you're going to an alternate future, you're going to a possible reality in the astral plane, that you're vibrating a certain frequency. And they said that as far as humanity is concerned, we're such a mess. I mean, we are so confused and, juking one way and juking the other way that even for the Pleiadians to go to an even possible future for humanity is pretty nigh on impossible. I mean, they've taken him to an alternative future where, for example, most of Florida is gone. I mean, he had a concern because he actually lives in Miami, where by '97 the hurricanes become so immensely bad that whole sections of Florida are going to have to be evacuated. And I'm not sure how far they've taken him because they say that so much of the future that we're in is to be decided, that we have an actual physical power to change the future and to change reality, which is the entire purpose of prophecy to begin with, is that if you can tell people possible future outcomes and basically advise them as to what the results of their actions are going to be, gives a person forewarning to be able to then change their actions and ultimately change an outcome. I don't think you can change the macrocosm of the future, but I think you can change the microcosm. I think the macrocosm is very much agreed upon by the group soul, by humanity incarnating here, because this is very much a university planet. It's very much a college world, and so there's still all kinds of funniness and parties and beer bashes and drinking and what have you. And at the same time, we're here to learn something. But I think that you have to take certain required courses, and these required courses all of humanity then have to buy into. And of course, when you go to college, you don't get all your required courses out of the way your freshman year. You wait until you're about to graduate, and you have to cram for finals and all that, and before you get out. And that's pretty much my analogy for how the planet is put together now. Everybody's trying to take the last classes that they need to take before the graduation occurs. But even the Pleidians, as far as this planet goes, say that there are alternate futures of this planet which just flat out haven't been decided yet. And in my work, my meditations and my sensitivity and my projections, my remote viewing of aspects in the future, it's very strange because I used to have a very, very solid grasp of what would happen and where things were going to go, and now, even now when I'm starting to project myself, it's like I fragment, where I see possibilities almost like a smashed diamond, where I'm actually seeing mirror images of all these different futures and realities. So we're really, literally, in about the next 3 years, in the deciding point as to what path we're going to take for the next maybe 2,000 years. And I've been told we can do it the hard way through war and disaster and destruction and disease and catastrophe, or we can do it the easy way through peace and love and understanding and processing all the stuff that's coming out of us in a positive way, rather than through hate and through lashing out. And I think with communication and understanding and enough people sort of getting on the bus and getting with the program, I think that the birth pangs of this new age can be greatly lessened and greatly eased. But the point is that they're just pangs. I mean, eventually this beautiful child is going to come out, and I liken it to a man who is shipwrecked and comes up to a beautiful island, like in Tahiti somewhere, and he stands up, and as he's walking in, he trips over a branch or a tree and stands up and brushes himself off and walks into an amazing, dazzling new paradise. I mean, I believe is the true future and the true destiny for humanity and mankind. And it's just a question of our working out our aggressiveness, our masculineness, our barbarism, which is not a bad thing. I mean, it's what makes us curious. It's what makes us drive. It's what forces us to strive and propel ourselves to bigger and better things. I mean, imagine if you evolved on a planet where there had never been a war, never been a famine, never been a political collapse. Be sort of like going to University of Santa Barbara and learning how to play volleyball and smoke dope for 4 years, as opposed to going to someplace like USC or Harvard, just as an example. I mean, who are you going to hire to do the job? So this is the best college in the universe. This is the Oxford, it's the Harvard, it's the USC, it's the Stanford of the galaxy, and it's actually a great honor to be here, to go through the trials and tribulations that we have to go through here, because we get a better learning experience and a better education here than literally anywhere else in the universe. And that's also how the Pleiadians feel and the people that I talk to. I mean, I haven't been in contact with these beings myself, so all I can do is report what I'm hearing from other people who have actually been there and brought back the physical evidence that shows me that they know what they're talking about.